The next section up is section 2.7. This is on page 151. It talks about product to sum and sum to product. Now, the good news in this section, they have a formula for every scenario possible. So any combination you can think of, they have a formula for. So, if I want to use one of them, there's no way of mixing things up. That is, they have sine times sine, cosine times cosine, and a sine times cosine. They have sine plus, sine minus, cosine plus, cosine minus. So pretty much, it's a matter of looking at those 7 formulas and figure out what is what. Example, if I glance at this first problem, problem number 2, and these problems are on page 152 in the book. If I glance at number 2, I see a cosine and a cosine. There's only one of those. You can't find 2 of them. So the good news is, you just have to eyeball it. The bad news, there's a lot of them. Now, luckily, I don't ask you to memorize those because I rarely test you on those. So this is the deal. If I put problems out of this section on the test, I will provide these formulas for you. Having said that, if I do not test you on this, I will not give you these formulas. And I have my reasons not to give you these formulas, which is why normally 2.7 is rarely tested. But it does come up in calculus, and that's why I'm covering that. So if I look at this, this says simply, this is 1/2 the cosine of the difference of whatever those are, plus the cosine of the sum. So the difference of those, 285 degrees minus 195 degrees, plus the cosine of the sum of those, 285 degrees plus 195 degrees. And this turns out to be 1/2 the cosine of, and this is 90 degrees, and this is the cosine, and if you add those right here, that turns out to be, what is that, 10, 9, 80, 480 degrees. So this is 1/2 the cosine of 90 degrees plus the cosine of, if I subtract 360 degrees, that's 120 degrees. Well, cosine of 90 is a 0. And 120 reference angle of 60, negative 1/2 because you're in quadrant 2. So the answer is negative 1/4. It might seem like a lot of work, but it's just simplifying, nothing more. And if I look at another problem, so let me make sure that I could eyeball those. Let me clear everything that I messed up here because, you know, they're cluttered now. And restart. And again, it's a matter of looking at those. I could number those 1 through 7 and say which one does it apply to. So if I look at number 6, well, there's only one formula that matches. There's no way they could be this because there's a minus. 2 signs with a minus, literally, they didn't even make the plus and say convert. They have a formula just for that. And what would that be? That would be, based on the formula, that would be twice sine of the difference of those, 255 degrees minus 15 divided by 2, cosine of the sum of those, 255 degrees plus 15 degrees divided by 2, and that would be twice the sine, and what would that be over 2? If I subtract, that's 240 degrees, and if I add 10, 60, 70 degrees, that's an ugly 270. And that's twice, well, this is the sine of 120 degrees, and this is the cosine of 135 degrees. Well, a reference angle of 60 degrees, that is actually radical 3 over 2. a reference angle of 45 degrees, that's radical 2 over 2. 120 is in quadrant 2, that's positive, and 135 is in quadrant 2, that's a negative. You could leave the answer like that. Again, I don't mind. You could simplify it, negative radical 6 over 2. Next problem on the list would be problem number 12, and directions. Write or express each product as a sum. Well, I have a sine times cosine. If I run to a sine times cosine, I'll notice there's only one of those. Trying to reverse these problems. Sine times cosine would be that. So that is 1/2 sine of the sum plus sine of the difference. That is 1/2 sine of the sum of those plus sine of the difference. Let me just double check that, make sure that's right. It was the sine of the sum plus sine of the difference. Yep, I'm never wrong. And that would be the sine of 10 theta plus the sine of negative 2 theta. And since sine is an even odd function, there it is. So as you see, there isn't much to really worry about in this section. And if I look at the last problem I'm going to do, number 24, it has a sine minus a sine, and a sine minus a sine. Oops. A sine minus a sine would be right there. So that is twice the sine of the difference divided by 2, cosine of the sum divided by 2. That is twice the sine of the difference divided by 2, cosine of the sum divided by 2. And that will be twice the sine. That will be negative 2 theta over 2. Cosine 3 theta plus, that's 4 theta divided by 2. And those are used in one section of calculus, but even that doesn't come up as much. And that will be twice the sine of theta, cosine of 2 theta, and this negative would just be shifted up front. I'm not going to get into identities, like I said, give you the homework. I did forget one thing. On number 24, when you get to these directions, it says express the sum as a product. You'll see the directions. Homework is 1 through 23, every other odd.